Now that we've reviewed how to escape input before we use it, we need to examine another important security concern, escaping output. Our primary concern about escaping output is cross-site scripting, or XSS for short. With SQL injection, a hacker would submit a string that makes SQL do things that we don't intend. In cross-site scripting, a hacker instead submits a string which is constructed to make our browser do things that we don't intend. It lets a hacker use JavaScript to script our site, which is why it's called cross-site scripting. There's a lot of different things that a hacker could do, including redirecting users to another web page, possibly even a fake one that looks just like our web page, or stealing cookies and login information. I've given you just a very simple example where I've defined an evil string. This would be something that would be submitted like via a form field. And then if at any point we take that string and we output it to one of our templates, then it will drop in that JavaScript into our template. And as our browser is rendering the page, it will say, oh, here's some JavaScript, and it will faithfully render the JavaScript and do whatever the JavaScript has asked it to do. Another smaller but still very real concern is that a user might intentionally or accidentally put in some HTML that we don't want, or which breaks our site layout. Something like a user comment that has some CSS in it, or an extra closing HTML tag. While not as harmful as cross-site scripting, it can mess up our application for our users. So we want to consider all user-entered data, URL parameters, form parameters, cookie data, and data that's already made it into our database. And we want to make sure that we escape that data to render it harmless to the browser. ERB, which we're using to output our templates, has a method built into it called HTML escape, or just H for short, that allows you to escape all the tags in a string before outputting them. It does it by turning every open and close tag symbol, the less than and greater than sign, into their HTML character entities, the ones that start with ampersand. We'll take a look at those in a moment. Now before Rails 3, all text was assumed to be safe, and if you output it in ERB, it would just output exactly as is. And it was up to you, the developer, to escape any text which might need to have HTML escape, or H around it. Now starting with Rails 3, that changed, and now all text is assumed to be unsafe, and Rails will automatically escape it before it outputs in ERB. This is a good thing because it removes the possibility that you'll forget to put an HTML escape somewhere. Instead, it will be up to you to tell Rails when you don't want something escaped. And you can do that by either using the raw helper method for a one-time use as output, or by calling HTML safe on the string so that Rails will always consider that string to be safe. Rails also gives us the HTML safe ? Method if we need to test whether a string is HTML safe or not. We'll take a look at these in a moment, but there are a couple of other helpers that I want us to look at first. The first of those is strip links, and this does exactly what you would think. It scans the string and removes any links that are inside of it. So that can be helpful if we just want to get the links out of some text, but we don't necessarily want to escape everything. Going a little further than that, we have the strip tags method. That takes out all of the tags. It doesn't escape them, it removes them. And then last of all, we have sanitize. Sanitize will remove HTML and JavaScript, and it does a really good job of watching for all the tricks that someone might use to try and sneak some code past you. Now by default, it will only remove the script tags, and it'll let all HTML through. But we can pass in options hash to tell it what tags and attributes we want to allow, and then everything else will be disallowed. What we're doing is passing in what's called a whitelist. So in my example, we have sanitize, subject content, and we're only going to allow the tags p, br, strong, and em through, and the only attributes that we're allowed to use there are ID, class, and style. Let's jump over to our application and try all of these methods out. Let's start out by creating ourselves a page where we can work with this, like a sandbox. So inside controllers, inside demo controller, I'm going to add a new method here, and I'm going to call it escape output. There we are. It's just an empty method. I don't need anything else in there, but I will need a template to go with it. So in the demo views folder, I'll add a new template, and we'll call this escape output.html.erb. So there's my template where I can work. And to start with, I'm just going to paste in an evil string and a good string. So the evil string has the JavaScript alert that we saw. The good string is just a nice little message that we might want to use that has some HTML in it. So to begin with, let's just output those and see what it looks like. I'm going to save that. I'll open up the terminal, Rails server to launch the web server, go into Firefox, we'll load up localhost 3000 demo escape output. So there we go. Notice that it did not give me the JavaScript pop-up, and it did not put my text in bold. That's because by default in Rails 3, it does the escaping for you. It assumes that they're not safe, and therefore it escapes them. Let's look at the source to see what it did. You can see all of the less than signs have been turned into ampersand LT semicolon, and the greater than signs are ampersand GT semicolon. Now these are just considered strings. They're no longer HTML tags. They're just character entities, and HTML renders them as strings. As I mentioned, in older versions of Rails, it used to be that you had to put an H tag around these if you wanted to get that escaping done for you. We don't have to do that now. That's built in. Instead, we have to do the opposite. We have to say raw if we don't want it to do it. So it's a one-time, basically saying, I know this may be unsafe. I don't care. I want the raw version, just this one time, please. So let's save it, and let's see what that gives us. Reload the page, and now we get the JavaScript executing, and then I get the bold text. So it went ahead and gave me the raw version of both of those. Now, once again, that's the behavior before Rails 3. The raw behavior is what we used to get, and we had to do the H. Now, H is the default, and we have to do the raw version. Now, as I mentioned, raw only considers this string to be safe for this one time for the output. It doesn't globally decide that. In fact, we can see that if we put in evilstring.html safe ? And goodstring.html safe ? We'll save those, and let's just try it out. We get those, and then you can see false. It's not a safe string. If we tried to use it somewhere else further down the page, it would once again do the escaping for us unless we put raw in front of it again. So now let's make another version of this real quick, and let's comment out the raw version just so that you'll have it there for the future. But instead, let's make a couple here that don't have raw in front of it. And let's mark both strings as being HTML safe. So now we're saying, hey, Rails, I want you to always consider this string to be safe. Now there's one caveat to that. If we change this string, if we add more text to it, it stops being safe again. It becomes polluted, and Rails will then revert back to its escaping behavior. That's a smart fail-safe mechanism. Now that we've told it to always consider these strings safe, let's try reloading it again and see what we get. So I'll go back, we'll reload it. I still get the JavaScript and the bold text. Now the string is considered safe. So every time that I output it now, it will just output. I don't need to tell it raw because I've said, hey, Rails, I know better than you. I know that this string is safe, so please go ahead and don't worry about escaping it. I'm going to override your defaults. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is that if we put an H around this still, if we go ahead and do the escaping the old way we did, and we try reloading it, it still doesn't escape it. It still is an HTML safe string. So when it runs H on it, it says, oh, you said you know better. I'm not going to escape it. And then when it tries to output, the default escaping kicks in and it says, oh, I see that you've already told me that that's safe. I will ignore it again. So it doesn't override what you've told it. Once you've said something is HTML safe, you're the authority and it trusts you to handle it. Now let's take a look at the other ones. Let's look at strip links and strip tags. I've got simple string here. It's the same string I had in the example. It has some strong tags in it and it has a link tag in it. So let's try strip links and see what that gives us. And then right behind it, let's put a BR tag here afterwards. We'll do strip tags as well. Let's reload the page. We can ignore the stuff at the top. What we're interested in here is that it stripped out the link here, and then it stripped out both the link and the tags here. Notice that it still escaped it. It was not considered HTML safe, even though we stripped it out. If we wanted it to be HTML safe, then we would need to specify here HTML safe. Let's try that. Now it says, okay, you said you know what you're doing. I'll no longer do my default behavior. But notice this, if we can put HTML safe up here and try it again, it did still escape it. And that's because we made changes to the string. It started out as being safe, but then when we went in and we altered the string, then suddenly it said, oh, I'm not going to consider that HTML safe again until you tell me that it definitely still is. So for the next example, let's just put another HR tag here and let's look at sanitize. So sanitize, I'm going to take the evil string all the way from the very top, and then I'm going to take simple string that we've been working with. And we'll just sanitize both of those and see what we get. Let's reload the page. You can ignore the pop-up because that was from the very first time. What I'm interested in is what happens below this second line here. Let's view source just so you can see what happened with the script tags. Where we had the bad string, it's gone. After the HR noticed, it stripped it out so there was nothing left. That's the default behavior of sanitize, is that it removes all the script tags, but it lets all the HTML through. Notice here with my simple string, all the HTML is still here. If you wanted to not have the HTML there, then you need to specify. You need to say, all right, the tags that we're going to whitelist, we can say we're going to whitelist none of them. So now no tags should be able to get through. Let's save it, reload the page, close that up. Now I forgot to put a BR tag in there, but this is the text. So it removed both the bold tags and the ahref tags from it. Let's just drop in a couple BR tags here so that it is clearer. And if we wanted to allow some through, then we could do that by saying, well, we want to allow the strong tag to come through. Let's save it, reload it, and there we are. Now we left the strong tag through, but we got rid of the link. So you can play around with the options for the tags and the attributes that you submit. The main thing is that I want to make sure you understand the concept of HTML safe, especially because it just changed in Rails 3. It's something that's new and that people are still getting used to, but ultimately I think it's going to be for everyone's benefit.